is a canopy term to study political, economic and social, cultural and religious institutions and practices of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Afghanistan, Myanmar and Nepal. Considering South Asia as a region and not just a collection of nation states, the term also encompasses the study of local and global circuits of connection and the South Asian diasporas. Literature from South Asian countries has to be explored and analyzed. Literature from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, Bhutan should have been thinking upon. The term South Asian literature refers to the literary works of writers from the Indian subcontinent and its surrounding areas. Countries to which South Asian literature writers are linked to South Asian countries include the countries of South Asian or Indian subcontinent. This conference aims to study issues like racism, colonialism, gender discrimination, bias, hierarchy, identity, war and partition, trauma, cultural discourses, and South Asian diaspora. A number of South Asian writers have emerged on the global literary scene since the end of the colonial era, offering a substantial contribution to the world literature. Writing either from the South Asian subcontinent itself or from abroad, many of the writers have had significant impact in places like United States and England, where they have won prizes and earned recognition. The critical responses to such issues can benefit the society to embrace cultural hybridization and individuality and globalization in the place of conservatism. I want to tell that around 225 participants have been registered to this conference from across all states of the nation. Participants are faculties and research scholars from renowned universities and colleges. The states from where they have been participated are Tamil Nadu, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, and West Bengal. We have received 24 research papers, which we are going to publish by Creative Publications Nanded with ISBN, book with ISBN. This conference has 3 technical sessions apart from inaugural and valedictory sessions. Dr. Vivek Sachdeva, Professor, Department of English, Guru Govind Singh, Indraprastha University, New Delhi, is the resource person of this technical session, and this session will be chaired by Dr. K. Rajkumar, Principal of Guru Buddhi Swami Mahavidyalaya Purna. And the next session will be started after lunch break, and the session will be started at 1:30. The resource person of this session is Dr. Madhavi Nikam, Professor, Department of English from Thane. And the chairperson of this session is Dr. L.V. Padmarani Rao, Professor, Department of English, Yashwant Mahavidyalaya, Nanded. And the last technical session before the valedictory session will be chaired by Dr. R.M. Lakhadeve sir, Associate Professor, Head of the Department, Mahatma Basheshwar College. And the resource person of this session will be Dr. Chidananda Bhattacharya from Kolkata. He is the professor and former dean. And the valedictory session of this conference will be at 3:30. The special invitee of this valedictory session will be Dr. V.R. More, Joint Director, Higher Education, Nanded. And the chief guest will be Honorable Dr. Nanova Munde, Director, Students Development. And the chairperson of this session will be Honorable Dr. Vinayak Rao Jadhav sir, our beloved principal. And this conference will run smoothly. We are trying to run this conference smoothly in this way, in this schedule. I hope the conference on issues and themes in South Asian studies being conducted by Department of English, Shivaji Mahavidyalaya Udgir, will be meaningful in discussion. So thank you all of you, and over to Mane sir.
Thank you very much, Kutte sir, for introducing the conference. Shateshu Jayate Shuraha, Sahastreshu Panditaha, Vakta Dasasahastreshu, Data Bahuti Vanava. I remember when I was the graduate student, my debate partner and I went to visit Bisense. I think it was the Jan Kalyan's office or something. And there was an issue, there was a topic. My partner was there, debate partner was there, Rajshekhar Solapur. And Bisense started speaking about Gnaneshwari and the Pasaidan, basically he was. It was the evening time, all of three were sitting on the floor and sir started speaking. It was a state level competition, but I remember 45 minutes of something like that he was speaking. I thought just 10% of what he is speaking, if I represent it same on in the competition, I would surely win the competition. There are so many memories from my graduation and post-graduation when we visited him for the guidance for so many topics. He has the authority over nearly every topic. Now, I request Dr. A.M. Navle sir to introduce today's chief guest and Dr. M.M. Nivargi sir. Welcome them and introduce both the guests. Over to you, Dr. Navle sir.
Thank you, Mr. P.D. Mane. The chief guest of inaugural function, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor of Swami Ramanand Tirth Marathwada University, Nanded, Professor Dr. Jogendra Singh Bishan, the keynote speaker, Professor Dr. M.M. Nivargi, the management representative, respected Srirama Patil, Treasurer of KSPM, Udgir, Principal, Chief Organizer and Chairperson, Dr. V.A. Jadhav, my colleague and the convener, Dr. K.W. Gutte, Mr. P.D. Mane, rest faculties and esteemed teacher-student participants who are accessing this inaugural session through Zoom platform. A very good morning and a warm welcome to you all. We are highly privileged and honored to have such distinguished guests for inauguration of this SRTMU sponsored one national level online conference on South Asian studies. And it is a matter of pride for both our department and institution that it is getting inaugurated at auspicious hands of Honorable PVC of our favorite university, Professor Dr. Jogendra Singh Bishan. I welcome all the dignitaries on the dais here and take this as an opportunity to introduce them. First and foremost, inaugural guest, Professor Dr. Bishan sir. He has rendered his yeoman service in multiple capacities, holding prestigious positions like member of Executive Council of Maulana Azad National Urdu University, Hyderabad, Government of Maharashtra's Chancellor's nominee for University Teachers Selection Committee of Shivaji University, Kolhapur, member of Common Statute Preparation Committee of Government of Maharashtra, as well as ex-principal of one of the top colleges of the university, that is Dayanand Arts College, Latur, as a member of the Management Council, member of the Academic Council, member of the Chairman of the Board of Studies in Hindi, Dean of Faculty of Humanities, and a number of time member of the Senate, and the rest dozens of prestigious committees of SRTMU Nanded, as well as some other universities, and excelled in all parameters of the higher education. He is one of the rarest humanitarians who has devoted his thorough life for the welfare of the stakeholders of higher education. He is known for first to come and last to go in his duties and services, and in many instances, he is found working in his office in out of office hours, and sometimes even on Sundays and holidays. Apart from a very good number of books, papers, presentations, and hundreds of the talks in his prestigious events, he has to his credit many academic and administrative innovations and accomplishments. When he was principal of the Dayanand College of Arts, Latur, he bagged a 2016 University Best College Award from urban category for his institution. As a teacher, he is a recipient of SRTMU University Best Teacher Award. In examination work, he is awarded as the Best GCS Award, as well as he was instrumental in bagging Best Exam Center Award for Dayanand Arts College, and hundreds of prizes in Youth Festival. And moreover, when he was IQC and NAC coordinator, his college, he was instrumental in fetching A grade to his Dayanand College of Arts, Latur, a process of the NAC Bangalore. In his student's life, too, is having glorious record of attainments in multiple capacities. He is a recipient of national level gold medal in NCC as a cadet, university level gold medal in youth festivals, and more than 75 prizes in state and university level elocution and debate competitions. As one of the instances also given by Mr. P.D. Mani. As an alumnus of Dayanand College of Latur, I personally listened to him many times, particularly on Swami Vivekananda and youth empowerment. He is also remembered ever as the most dominant, studious, and vibrant voice of the Senate Hall of SRTM. And at present, he is working as a pro-vice chancellor of our parent university. And on day after tomorrow, that is on 6th August, what I think so, 2011, he is completing his 2 years as a successful and visionary PVC of SRTM University, Nanded, and entering in the 3rd year of his 5-year tenure. I take this opportunity to congratulate him and extend wishes to him on behalf of the college and the management. Our next guest, the keynote speaker, Dr. M.M. Nevargi, is at present working as Professor of English in MGM Ahmedpur. He is a gold medalist at his PhD and completed his doctorate on Native American literature from Shivaji University, Kolhapur. He too is having a good academic record, the chairman of our BOS and member of the Academic Council, and has a good number of books, papers, presentations, and talks to his credit. So far, 18 scholars awarded PhD under his supervision, and above all, as a NAC coordinator, he too is instrumental in bagging a grade by NAC to his institution. I, on behalf of my department and the college, would like to extend my warm welcome to Honorable Inaugural and Keynote guest, as well as our organizing host principal, Dr. V. A. Jadhav, and the management representative, treasurer of KSPM, Honorable Srirao Patil Tatya. As both are the hosts and as per their directions, on behalf of them, let me introduce briefly the college and the management also. KSPM Mandal was founded in 1964, over 5.5 decades ago, with a hostel, small hostel, Basti Graha, and with the motto Bahujan Hitai Bahujan Sukhai, that is welfare and the betterment of the masses. Today, the trust has spread up to 21 institutions, including schools at different locations, 4 junior colleges and 2 senior colleges, including Shivaji College as a core college, as core institutions, all of which are located in rural areas and striving to achieve its aims and objectives in the sacred mission of teaching and empowering the masses. It was difficult to establish and maintain an institution in such an economically, socially, and educationally backward place with no one to patronize or assist politically or monetarily. However, with their strong willpower and missionary enthusiasm, our founding fathers surmounted every difficulty and completed this Herculean task. Because of its altruistic action and contributions to the cause of education, the KSPM Udgir has received an oath of repeat today. Our college celebrated its golden jubilee year in 2018 after 5.5 decades of untiring dedication. We have a junior wing that is distinct yet connected to the main senior wing. Many successful students have graduated from our college, which includes teachers, businessmen, lawyers, professors, social workers, and even politicians. Our alumni, prominent alumni, includes both one MP who represented Bidar Lok Sabha constituency and 2 MLAs, Govind Kendre and late Chandrasekhar Bhosle, who represented Udgir Vidhan Sabha constituency. Once, Maharashtra HSC topper Rahul Kasraikar was also our student. We had also a good line of high-profile principals, including Dr. Mavi Suryavanshi, M.U. Suryavanshi, ex-MPSC chairman, Government of Maharashtra, and late Dr. P.G. Jadhav, ex-registrar of SRTM, and so on. We are also recipient of the 2017-18 Best College Award of our parent university from rural category. After introducing guests to the management and the college, it is my duty to talk about my department as a HOD in few words, which is hosting this event. With the foundation of Shivaji Mahavidyalaya, that is with inception. The Department of English has been in operation, that is since 1968. At the undergraduate level, the department offers English as a compulsory and elective course. The Department of English is the largest department of the college with more than 1,200 students enrolled in present academic year, good result outcomes, and active engagement of faculty in teaching, research, publication, and extracurricular activities. Our department is now one of the best English departments of the colleges affiliated to SRTM University Nanded. Department academic members, that is faculties, have edited 46 books, which have 170 world's top overseas library holdings, and over 70 research papers, book chapters so far. Faculty members from the department have actively participated in various national and international conferences, seminars, workshops, and other co-curricular activities, delivering more than 81 talks on various occasions. The department has a history of high academic achievements and active engagements of teachers and students in a variety of activities. So far, 10 research scholars have been awarded PhD from department supervisors. The department faculty has represented on BOS in English for 3 consecutive terms, with 1 short term on official nominated syllabus committee and 1 time on a senate of the university. Distinguished MPs, MLAs, social workers, educators, international fellows, and so on are among the department's notable alumni. Since the inception of the department, thousands of students have successfully graduated and are striving to promote the name and fame of their alma mater. In the last 5 years, our 2 students bagged 3 university topper prizes in both compulsory as well as optional English. In the last 3 years, the department hosted 4 prestigious events with record-breaking responses. One day, university sponsored a workshop on new syllabus with 350 registered participants. One 2-day university sponsored interactive web conference on pandemic literature with 365 registered participants, and one national level online essay competition on coronavirus with 69 registered contestants nationwide, and one university level 4-day online invited lecture series for undergraduate students of English of SRTM University Nanded with 1,647 registered participants from SRTM jurisdictions. And this department is privileged today and honored to have Dr. J.M. Bissen, sir, like exceptional and distinguished a visionary personality to inaugurate this online event, online conference. Once again, I welcome Honorable PVC sir, Professor Bissen sir, keynote speaker Dr. Nivagi, Honorable Srirang Tata Patil, Principal Dr. Vinayak Jadhav, and all of you to inaugural session of this online conference on South Asian Studies, and look forward to an interesting debate discourse throughout the day here on South Asian literature. I'm sure we all will be have fruitful and rewarding exchanges in the day. Thank you. Over to Mr. P.D. Mane.
Thank you very much, Dr. Navla sir. Thank you for your brief introduction. Rather than wasting any more time, I invite Honorable Professor Dr. Jogendra C. Bissen sir, Pro Vice Chancellor, Swami Ramanand Tirth, Marathwada University, Nanded, for his inaugural talk. Over to you, Bissen sir.
Good morning, one and all. Honorable Chair, Principal Dr. Vinayak Jadhav sir, renowned resource persons, Honorable Srirang Patil, BOS Chairman Dr. Mahesh Nivargi, Head of Department Dr. Arvind Navle, Organizer of this conference Dr. Kiran Gutte, and dear participants, I hereby declare that the National E-Conference on the topic Issues and Themes in South Asian Studies has been inaugurated. At very outset, I also take pleasure in congratulating the college and the team of organizers for initiating this National E-Conference on the very sensitive and essentially needed topic. Literature is the mirror of society, as incidences happening in society are reflected in the literature. Literature is not meant only for entertainment, but it is a major one way of spread awareness in the society. This topic is related with various fields like history, geography, religion and culture, politics, social and economic issues, and much more. Countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Afghanistan, Bhutan are covered under the rubric of South Asia. These countries have gained freedom from British colonial power during 1940 and so. The literature produced in these nations are generally referred to as South Asian studies. As far as nomenclature is concerned, varied terms like Commonwealth literature, Third World literature, or New English literature are used to refer the produced literature in these nations. One observes some common issues in such literature due to the fact that they have emerged from the legacy of experience of colonization. It is also observed that literature of South Asia have developed through 3 stages. In the initial phase, there was imitation of great works of colonizers. Later, it turned into the phase of protest, of resistance. Finally, it has emerged with its own distinct flavor. In the last few years, this literature has seen a rapid increase in the writing about society, politics, and new sensibilities. Large number of women writers are giving vent to their issues. There is a noticeable contribution from Dalit literature also. All this has given insight into the overall socio-political in the subcontinent. Writings are also found on the lives of liberal Muslims who are caught in the dilemma of secularism and extremism in the countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan. In India, one of the new areas of literature focus is the disturbed in northeast due to the location and community. Finally, translation of the vernacular literature into English will make its impression on the literature of the world. It is the responsibility of teacher to make the truths reach till the students of the society. I am very sure that you will truly and sincerely perform your responsibilities and duties. Dear friends, you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start from where you are and change the ending. I am sure in this e-conference, much deliberation will take place in the resource persons talk. This conference will definitely provide important output to the nation. Lastly, I will only say some lines of Raghuveer Saran Mishra. ऐसे सत्य सिखाना जग को, ऐसे सत्य सिखाना जग को, अनाचार जग से मिट जाए. ऐसे सत्य सिखाना जग को, अनाचार जग से मिट जाए. मिटे जगत की असत कल्पना, शाश्वत सत्य भूमि पर आए. तुम भूखे भगवान, सभी अध्यापक भूखे भगवान के स्वरूप हैं. तुम भूखे भगवान, तुम्हारे चरणों में ईश्वर मिलते हैं. तुम अंतर के माली, तुमसे फूल जिंदगी के खिलते हैं. थैंक यू. बेस्ट विशेष. ओके.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. We teachers, we are the Satyanveshi, and surely we will try to be that. Now, I request Honorable Dr. M.M. Nivargi, sir, Professor, Department of English, Mahatma Gandhi Mahavidyalaya, Ahmedpur, Chairman, Board of Studies, SRTM University, Nanded, for his keynote address. Over to you, Dr. Nivargi, sir. Dr. Nivargi, sir. Please unmute, sir. Nivargi sir, please unmute yourself.
Yes. Now I think I'm audible. A very good morning to one and all. Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, Honorable Mr. Srirang Patil, Treasurer of Kisan Shikshan Prasarak Mandal, Honorable Principal Vinayak Rao Jadhav sir, Honorable Head Dr. Novelist, and Organizer Dr. Gutte, Mr. Mane, and other colleagues, and dear participants. It gives me immense pleasure to be associated with you all on the occasion of this online conference on a very pertinent theme in the area of South Asian studies. The origin of South Asian studies can be traced back to the post-Second World War period, when the discipline of area studies was started mainly by American universities. Now, this area studies was a novel concept in those days, which combined many interdisciplinary fields of research and scholarship pertaining to particular geographical, national or federal or cultural regions. The term area studies exists primarily as a general description for what are, in practice of scholarship, many heterogeneous fields of research. They encompass both social sciences and humanities. Now, as a branch of area studies, many other sub-branches developed: American studies, African studies, South Asian studies. It doesn't mean that South Asian studies did not exist prior to this age, prior to the rise of area studies. It existed, but under a very different label. The label was Oriental studies. The label was Indology. And after Second World War, when the various universities started centers of area studies in their universities, the concept first spread to Europe and then to India. The premier university, like Jawaharlal Nehru University in India, is the first to start this South Asian studies in India. Today, in the central universities like Pondicherry University and University of Madras, we have separate departments of South Asian studies. It shows that during the past few decades, the concept of a separate field of South Asian studies has spread all over the world. In South Asian studies, India naturally emerges as the leader because culturally its roots go back to thousands of years, and the cultural influence of India cannot be eradicated from the adjoining geographical regions like Pakistan, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan. All these regions have been culturally influenced by India. So any study of history, culture, literature of these countries has to consider the links of these countries with India. Now it gives rise to contradictory perceptions. For example, the event of partition of India was a very painful incident for the Indian people who saw the end of the dream of their leaders who dreamt of a united India. On the other hand, the other country saw it as a liberation from the domination of a religion which they consider as a pagan religion. These perceptions have to be taken into account when we are researching in a field like South Asian studies. This is a very pertinent and essential field because unlike the other emerging field of cultural studies, it includes the diaspora and immigration. The issues of diaspora and immigration with the resultant issues of hybridization, fragmentation, disruption of tradition. These issues are interconnected. These issues are common for the South Asian region. And if we go back to history, the complete region of South Asia will appear to us as a culturally cohesive region. Today, Asian studies in general has occupied a very important place in all the major universities of the world. As a branch of Asian studies, the major researching hubs of South Asian studies are one in Sweden, that is South Asian Studies Center. It has its own SAS net. They also produce a very good scholarly journal. Then we have in the University of London a separate department of area studies which also has a South Asian studies branch. The Tokyo University of Foreign Studies also encompasses South Asian studies. And in the Oxford University also we can find a major research center devoted to Asian studies. So today this idea has caught up among the scholars. On the one hand, we can see the rise of cultural studies. Simultaneously, we also can see the rise of Asian studies or its sub branch, South Asian studies. But then, as I mentioned, cultural studies do not take into account issues like immigration, issues like diaspora, and there the handicap lies. When we look at an interdisciplinary field of research like this, we embrace a large number of subsets. Subsets like Dravidian studies, Bengal studies, Tamilology, Tibetan studies, Filipinology, Myanmar studies. All these are included under the large umbrella term of South Asian studies. It is essential for us not to compartmentalize the literary, cultural, historical, and political studies, because no nation can live behind an iron curtain. From the term iron curtain, you may remember the former Soviet Union. And in the years of the Cold War, the South Asian studies was criticized as a vehicle for the secret services, American secret services like CIA and FBI, a vehicle which they are using for forwarding their own agenda. Now, as the Cold War is over, as we have stepped into a post-Soviet Union era, as we are progressing into the 21st century, all the criticisms have become meaningless. Today, we are rather going forward in this field of study with new features and new ideas, like what happens to the democracies of all these countries in the post-colonial time? What happens to the military power? What happens to the cultural development? A very interesting phenomenon has been seen by the historians, especially in the post-independence period, where the Pakistanis wanted to separate themselves from the Indus Valley civilization influence. And they, today, the scholars, the official historians of that area, they connect to the Afghan roots rather than the roots which are visible in their own geographical area, where places like Mohenjo-daro, Harappa are situated. Why are they trying to disconnect themselves from a very grand tradition of the Indus Valley civilization? Why are they trying to connect themselves to a very strange alien tradition which emerged in the Middle Eastern countries? This may be a part of the politics of the area. Now, how has this politics affected the community of scholars? These questions are being explored by the present day scholars of South Asian studies. Almost all the major publishing houses today are publishing for the South Asian studies in the form of a series of publications like the Cambridge South Asian series. Cambridge South Asian series has monographs, by very distinguished scholars, monographs like the Rise of Gandhi and the special issues on the mutiny in Meerut and other incidents in the history. They are publishing special issues of books. Routledge, Taylor and Francis, and other leading publishers are publishing the journals specially dedicated to South Asian studies. These incidents in the contemporary world prove that this area of South Asian studies has become a very prominent area of research in the contemporary times, and there is immense scope for research in this area because we can go back in past in the manner of Indology, and we can go back thousands of years, or we can look at the contemporary issues like the trauma of partition and the related issues, or as I saw the latest issue of South Asian Studies Journal by the Cambridge, the scholars are now talking about the outreach of India in the outer space. They are looking at the future. So past, present, and future are being researched in this particular area of South Asian studies. And I'm very hopeful that it will bring out very stimulating, very interesting outcomes in the form of publications, in the form of certain conferences like this one in near future. I hope that I have been able to give some idea about the field in which the present conference is being held. I noticed that we have already crossed the timeline for the inaugural session, and I also respect the resource persons, Dr. Sachdeva, Dr. Mrs. Nikam, and Dr. Bhattacharji. And the participants must be waiting to listen to their scholarly discourses. So without holding these resource persons further, I would like to conclude my address, and I would like to express my gratitude to the organizers of this conference for making me a part of this very important conference. This department has a unique tradition of organizing very good conferences, and this is yet another incident in the glorious tradition of the Department of English of the esteemed Institute Shivaji Mahavidyalaya. I thank the organizers for inviting me. Thank you very much, and all the best for the conference.
Thank you very much, sir. Now Rather than wasting any time, I request Dr. V. A. Jadhav, sir, Principal Shivaji Mahavidyalaya, Udgir, for his presidential address. Over to you, Dr. Jadhav, sir. Now I welcome
Unmute.
presidential address of Dr.
Ask him to
V. A. Jadhav, Principal Shivaji Mahavidyalaya, Udgir.
Principal sir, unmute yourself.
Please unmute yourself, sir.
Unmute your microphone. Simply unmute your microphone, sir. You are not
Sir,
audible,
unmute
sir.
your microphone. You are not audible.
Jadhav sir, microphone. IPF, you are not audible.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Now. Good morning to you all, sir. Respected Sri Srirangaraji Patil, Treasurer, Kisan Shikshan Prasarak Mandal Udgir, Honorable Chief Guest and Inaugurator of today's online seminar, Dr. Jogendra Singh Ji Bisen, sir, Pro Vice Chancellor, SRTMU Nanded, Keynote Addresser, Honorable Dr. M. Nivargi, sir, Professor, Department of English, Mahatma Gandhi College, Ahmedpur, and POS Chairman of SRTMU Nanded. All the office bearers and management council members of Kisan Shikshan Prasarak Mandal Udgir, faculty members, participants, and all dear student friends. Actually, I am a man of mathematics. When I was discussing about the title South Asian Studies with English department faculty members, several questions were there in my mind. Some of them are, what is South Asian Studies? What is modern South Asian Studies? What are the courses in South Asian Studies? Are there any major, minor programs? Is there any center in India, etc.? Is there any difference between South Indian studies and South Indian literature, and so on? So, Honorable Vice Chancellor Dr. Bisen sir and BOS Chairman Dr. Nivargi sir expressed their views about concept of South Asian studies. Both of them rightly pointed out the issues in South Asian studies. South Asian studies is an interdisciplinary field that deals with the past and contemporary life of 1/5 of the world's population. South Asian studies is the study of this region, its culture, languages, and people. Actually, it is an umbrella term to study the political, economic, social, cultural, and religious institutions and practices of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Myanmar, etc. South Asia has had cultural and economic links with other countries and regions through its history. This conference is focused on issues like racism, colonialism, gender discrimination and bias, hierarchy, identity, war and partition, cultural discourses, feminism. In present scenario, gender concerns, indigenous people, minority, literature and films, literature and media, contemporary mythological narratives, partition literature, post-colonial discourses in a literature and South Asian diaspora. A number of South Asian writers have emerged on the global literacy scene since the end of colonial era, offering a substantial contribution in the world literature. South Asian literature is one of the richest literature in the world and is a storehouse of a rich ideological and cultural tradition. Writers from Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, as well as writers from South Asian descent have won worldwide acclaim by virtue of their extraordinary creative works. Religion, caste, gender, globalization, and social change are some of the issues in the South Asian literature that would be focused in this conference. I am not the one to judge and evaluate outcome, but the time itself would. I would like to express my deepest gratitude and thanks to Dr. Bisen sir, Pro Vice Chancellor, Swami Raman Tirth Marathwada University Nanded, for being with us. I admire and appreciate the thought of Dr. Nivarg sir as he expressed. My hearty congrats to Dr. Gutte, Dr. Navle, Dr. Mane, all from English department. Thank you, Dr. Kumar, Vice Principal, Dr. Jacob, Dr. Manse, for their toiling efforts to perfect the seminar. I hope there will be positive discussions taking place in this online conference. I welcome all the participants as a principal and chief organizer of this conference. Thank you and congrats to the organizing committee. Thank you.
Thank you very
Mane, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. I request all the participants to not to log out from this, because we are going to be continued for the second session after the end of this session. There won't be any break, so please don't log out. Now I request Dr. H.W. Kulkarni sir, Associate Professor, HOD, Department of Commerce, for proposing the vote of thanks. Dr. Kulkarni sir.
Okay. I'm very heartily gratitude to all the speakers for sharing their graceful words with us in this conference. I want to extend my generous thanks to special invitees, Honorable Mr. Siringrao Patil, and chief guest of this conference, Honorable Bisen, Pro VC of SRTMU, who has given inaugural talk and guided with us, to Honorable Dr. Nivargi sir, BOS Chairman of English Department and Head of English Department, MGM College, Ahmedpur. He has addressed, and Dr. Principal V.A. Jadhav sir, who has given the presidential remarks. Thanks to all the people who helped either directly or indirectly to make the national conference successful, especially Dr. A.M. Navle sir, HOD, convener Dr. K.W. Gutte sir, anchor Professor P.D. Mane sir, Vice Principal Dr. S.V. Jagtap sir, Dr. R.M. Manjre sir, Dr. Vishnu Pawar sir, IQC coordinator, and Registrar B.K. Patil sir, and non-teaching member Bhimrao Jadhav sir, and all the respective participant and dear students, teaching and non-teaching staff of our college. Thanks to all.
Thank you, Kulkarni sir. Now I hand over the charge of second session to Dr. Gutte sir. Professor Gutte sir, please take the charge of second session, and the second session begins from here. Thank you very much.
Dr. Sasadeva, welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. Now,
Thank you.
now we'll start the technical session. First, after the inaugural session, the chairperson of this technical session is Dr. K. Rajkumar sir, Principal Sri Guru Buddhi Swami Mahavidyalaya Purna, and we have the resource person Dr. Vivek Sachdeva sir. First, I will introduce both of them, and then we'll start this session. I have to, as a tradition, I have to introduce the chairperson. Dr. K. Rajkumar sir is a principal, and he has 32 years of teaching experience, and he was visiting faculty for MA English, visiting faculty for PN College Nanded and Swami Ramanand Marathwada University Nanded, and he was academic counselor for MA English, Indira Gandhi University, National Open University, New Delhi. And as a research guide, he had successfully guided 12 students. Under his guidance, 12 research scholars have been awarded with PhD, and 11 research scholars have been awarded with MPhil. And he has completed one UGC minor research project. He has authored 5 books, and he has published 24 research articles. And as a lecturer, he has delivered lectures at very national and international national and international conferences and training programs in academic colleges. And as a administrative, he has completed his 4 years as a principal. He had acted as IQAC coordinator, NAC steering committee, and in university level, he was a member of academic council, Swami Ramanand Tirth Marathwada University, member of research and recognition committee, and member of board of examinations, BOE, SRTM in Nanded, member of board of studies. And the resource person of this technical session is Honorable Dr. Vivek Sachdeva sir. He is the professor, Department of English at GGSIP University, New Delhi. He has 20 years of teaching experience. His area of specialization is film studies. His doctoral research was on a study of narrative in fiction and film, with special reference to Ruth Parwar Jhabawala's novels and films. He has also authored a book on Shyam Benegal's cinema, as we know Shyam Benegal. And currently, Vivek Sachdeva sir is working on the representation of partition in Punjabi drama and also in film made in India and Pakistan. Besides, he is also exploring the concept of time in Indian philosophical tradition to contribute to the narrative theory from the Indian perspective. He is a translator and creative writer. Recently, he has translated Punjabi poetry and Punjabi partition plays into English. He has authored and translated some books. The name of book is Sun and Silence, translation of Hindi poetry into English. The Dawn Shall Break is also a translated book. Punjabi poetry from medieval to modern is manuscript of his book has been submitted, and select Punjabi partition plays from the fractured land. This book has been edited by Sachdeva sir, and his critical work as fiction to film, The Household and the Heat and Dust, Householder and Heat and Dust. Next, his critical work is Identities in South Asia, Conflicts and Assertions. So these are the critical work and the books he has translated, and I have to introduce him in a very concise way. So I request Vivek Sachdeva sir for his talk on the title or the topic of his talk is The Question of Home in Garam Hawa, Mammo and Mulk. These are all three films, and his topic is The Question of Home in Garam Hawa, Mammo and Mulk. So I request Sachdeva sir to talk on this topic as a resource person. We are honored to listen to you. Thank you, sir, and over to you, Sachdeva sir.
Thank you, Kiran. Thank you very much, and good morning to all of you. I congratulate Shivaji Mahavidyalaya and SRTM University for coming together to organize this conference on South Asia. And I shall be talking about, as Kiran told me, about an issue that affects the entire region of South Asia. And I'm happy to observe that more than 2 speakers in the inaugural session mentioned the partition of India, which means that how important the partition of India is to the people of India, and how important position it holds in the minds of the people. This is one incident, or we can say one event in the history of this region that continues to affect us even today. Well, the partition of India in 1947, which coincides with the freedom of British India from the colonial rule, is the most catastrophic event in the history of modern India. 2 countries, India and Pakistan, were carved out of one. Bangladesh came into being later. the decision of dividing a country into two, in which two major regions were affected the most. They were Punjab on the western border and Bengal on the eastern border. A decision that continued to change borders, identities, continues to affect the politics and economy of South Asia even today. There are certain issues which are affecting the diplomatic relations between different countries. The way we look at ourselves and look at others in this region, all these things, somewhere they take us back to the moment of partition. Dividing a country into two might have served the nationalist interest of political parties or some hidden agenda of the colonial rulers, as there is one theory about that as well. But it cannot be seen as the public sentiment. Yeah. There were people who were against the idea of partition. And some of them were members of the Unionist Party, which won elections in 1936. And that party was initially against the idea of partition. There were many nationalists who were against the idea of partition. But still it happened. It happened and it has changed everything in this region. So in the name of dividing a country, the provinces of Bengal and Punjab were divided, while people of other identities, I mean to say Sindhis, or maybe some part of people from Balochistan as well, and people from what we today call Bangladesh, they were also affected by it. The decision resulted into communal riots, rapes, violence, honor killing. Another tragic aspect of this fateful event was the migration of people. Millions of people were forced to leave their homelands and shift to a new country, which was given to them on the basis of their religious identity. And what madness was that? Mantu has beautifully expressed in that story, Toba Tek Singh. Everybody talks about it. And Mantu, in a way, exposes the hidden madness behind the whole decision of dividing one country into two. The partition has given us vocabulary. I belong to Punjab, and my grandfathers and maternal grandfather, paternal grandfather, parents, they came from Pakistan. In their vocabulary, they would never refer to 1947 as independence or freedom. They would always use words like Batwara, Vand. Vand is division in Punjabi. Or then we are familiar with words like Muhajirs or Sharnarthi. This is a vocabulary which became part of people's discourse. Now, this decision also created a rift between categories like Watan and Mulk, homeland and new country, which was given to people. So for the first time in the history of this region, the religious identity and new national identity coalesced into one. And they began to be used interchangeably, which was never the case before that. In popular imagination, the simplistic binary of Pakistan for Muslims and Hindustan for Hindus and other religious communities, broadly non-Muslims, that was created. This naive understanding made the position of Muslims who decided to stay in India a matter of debate. This is a matter which continues to clamor in the political sphere even today. And while through discussion of these three films, I want to engage with this very idea. Now, this presentation engages with the question of the status of Muslim vis-a-vis modern India as a nation state, the question of home, and I'll also make an attempt to understand how these three films deal with the issue. First, I'll talk about the historical process through which these identities are formulated in India, or at that time, the British India, and how the politics of identities continue to affect us today. And then I'll talk about these films in the larger frame of Indian cinema. Hindi cinema. But before I start talking about partition, the first important question is, why am I talking about partition? Because all these three films do not give us what we call the visual of partition or the conventional narrative of partition. These films do not portray the trauma, the violence, or migration, which are generally associated with partition films. I'm reading these films, connecting them with the partition. So I'm reading these films as partition films. All of the films under discussion may not be narrating the incidents associated with partition, but the issue shown in these films is seen as the legacy of partition of India. These films deal more with the aftermath of partition than showing the violence or trauma of partition. These films build a discourse on a problem that India as a modern nation state is facing. But the roots of the problem can be found in the history. The seeds of what is happening in the first half of the 20th century British India, the communal rights of 1947, the way Muslims have been perceived in the post-independence India is a long and complex narrative. The argument is that perception of Muslims in general and their representation in Hindi cinema are symptomatic of that complex history and complicated relationships between different communities. Now, what happened in 1947 was not a sudden eruption of an unimaginable incident. Be it the idea of division or eruption of communal rights, both the phenomena have a history to fall back upon. I'm referring to the first partition of Bengal done by Lord Curzon in 1905. The territorial organization, as it was called, of Bengal resulted into division of Bengal into Eastern Muslim-dominated Bengal and Western Hindu-dominated Bengal. Owing to various protests, the decision was undone by Lord Hardinge in 1911. But the idea of dividing a country, a region into two on the basis of religious identities was already there in the imagination of our colonial rulers. Now, Khilafat movement, which arose in 1919 as a pan-Islamic force in India to salvage the Ottoman Caliph, Mahatma Gandhi's support, his call to the Muslims of India to support the movement, and eruption of communal riots in the decade of 1920s, especially in Punjab. So things are changing in India. Ever since 1857, the British had been following very carefully a policy of divide and rule, which we can say facilitated the process of identity formation in India, and different communities which were living together, despite small linguistic and cultural differences, they were made realize that you belong to a different community and you make a different nation. So there were many common points between three communities, especially with reference to Punjab. If there are three dominant communities, Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, they share their language, they share food, they share culture. Despite those common points, these communities were very systematically divided during the colonial period. And this religious divide superseded over common culture and heritage. It is important for us to understand why these incidents took place, what were the historical reasons, and how this history has affected personal and political spheres in post-colonial India as well. Now, if we try to understand what the British were doing, they had the anxiety of imposing their linear model in India, which from their perspective was their administrative requirement. The British colonizers were influenced by the scientific ideas emerging in the West in the 17th and 18th century, building on the ideas of Galileo, Bacon, and Newton. A mathematical frame was devised to understand the material world. Among them, the ideas of Newton were of the highest influence, we can say. Newtonian physics was based on the idea of absolute space, which is unaffected by activities taken therein. The change of events was understood with reference to time. So time and space, they are becoming important even how in Newtonian physics. He developed a model in which basis of reality was understood as particle, and that was considered to be the smallest unit of material existence. And this very paradigm, to devise the smallest unit in order to understand the entire vast universe, is applied on human societies as well. And in order to understand every society, its smallest unit was imagined and understood by the colonial masters from their own perspective, which led to the formation of these narrow identities. In the latter part of the 18th and first half of the 19th century also began the process of reimagining human societies as nation groups. And this was happening worldwide, not only in India, it was happening all over the world. The idea of nation state emerged. Reorganization of the world, especially Europe, drawing maps, having fixed borders, bringing people together with common language, ethnicity, religion, gave them the idea of nation. And we know that how imagined communities talked about the entire process. Western colonizers, in order to establish their rule in Asia and Middle East, implemented their latest Western linear scientific model on their colonies as well. Invoking modern scientific knowledge gave them a discourse to justify their rule in the colonies. In Newtonian physics, the smallest unit was indestructible, and to quote Capra, the inner constitution of the particle being independent of their mutual interaction. So it means whatever interaction between different particles is taking place, but particles would continue to retain their individual entity or identity. So modern scientific way of understanding and organizing the world was instrumental in the colonial domination of the Middle East, as well as what we today call South Asia. Chinua Achebe, in his work Home and Exile, defines the idea of a nation. And his idea of nation is based on his memory, which includes the memory of his family, the memory of the land, the tribe, its language, its culture, history. And it's important for us that how groups of people which were sharing common language, common cultural heritage, how they started imagining themselves as different nations. So that's the reason I'm invoking Chinua Achebe's idea of nation here. And Chinua Achebe disagrees with the European model. He also discusses how Europeans understood and discussed Africa from their vantage points. There is a consistent patterns in the European gaze looking at Africa, Middle East, and India as well. So there are various differences between the way African society or the Middle Eastern or Indian societies are structured, but each of them has its own nature and form. But what brings these societies together is the presentation of the common pattern of the colonial policies, European gaze, and imposing Western models to govern them from their own point of view. Imposing Western linear and ideas of homogeneity caused problems in India as well. Going beyond the binaries of Hindus and Muslims, the Western intellectuals at that time failed to understand the complex nature of even Hindu society. What to speak of the obvious differences between Hindu societies or Muslim society, how even Hindu society is structured, the British colonial rulers failed to understand that as well. One simple example is they failed to understand the difference between caste and jati. This reflects their confusion. How Hindu society operates differently in different regions was beyond their theoretical frame. So similarly, they could not understand how there are different kinds of Muslims in India. I'm going beyond the categories of Shias and Sunnis. So there are other Muslim communities in India, and the way they practice Islam is different from the way Shias or Sunnis would practice Islam. So by putting Indian society into narrow and rigid pigeonhole blocks of identities, the Europeans overlooked fluid nature of identities in India. And they ended up dividing Indian people into broad categories, with each category being a very stiff and standardize identity. Their administration and their policies of divide and rule resulted into widening the gap between Hindus and Muslims into gulfs. What I'm trying to say is I'm not romanticizing the time period before the colonial period. There were differences between Hindu communities and Muslim communities, but those differences were not, we can say, the way we understand communal differences today. But those differences were because these were different communities, they had different practices, but at the same time, there were so many common practices among these people. Second aspect, in India, the way if we understand how identities operate, then it is not only religion that plays an important role, region also plays a very important role. Whether it is region and language. Look at the way we have Bihari, Punjabis, Gujaratis, Marathis, Bengalis. So this identity is formulated on the basis of their language as well as the region they belong to. So dividing Indian society into different groups for their own convenience, which was a subtle design to rule over India, they ended up dividing into Indian society into different categories. And in the context of Punjab, especially, Sikhs were made conscious that they make a different social and cultural group and hence a separate nation. And in the first part of the 20th century, 1920s onwards, Sikhs also have a movement when they made this claim that hum Hindu nahi. And they asserted their different identity, that we are not Hindus. And how British policies or the acts like Government of India Act of 909 or 1919 and 1930s, they had different policies of giving civil jobs to one community, military jobs to another's. They invented the idea of different electorates, and it all resulted into widening the gulf between, there were small fault lines in our society, and those fault lines were further, we can say, ruptured, and they were widened into huge gulfs. And that ultimately manifested in the form of riots in 1947. So, and it is a well-established thesis that films in modern times foster identities, including national identity. Films in the 20th century have played the role which was played by the printing press in the 17th and 18th centuries. The experience of watching films in a theater in old times, if not these days when we watch films on our laptops, experience of watching films in theater, and then by enthralled by images, the people imagined themselves as a community, and the narrative patterns of cinema was also shaping the imagination of the people. The dialectical relationship between reality and cinema reflected the anxieties of a nation, and at the same time, it was constructing nationalist concerns for the masses. The narrative patterns in these films, the cinematic image, the mass appeal, played a significant role in, I quote, in creating, maintaining, disrupting individual, communal, ethnic, and national identities. As the idea of the nation is a genus-based phenomenon, people go back to their past, historical and mythological, to imagine a nation for the future. So in Indian cinema in the decade of 1920s, when we have so many films on either Hindu mythology or Islamic tales or Arabic tales, they are fostering this process of identity formation. Immediately after independence, Hindi cinema operated under the anxiety of nation building. It was fulfilling that agenda. Though partition war also resulted into many people associated with filmmaking at Lahore migrating to Bombay, now Mumbai, the mainstream Hindi cinema maintains a kind of silence over partition, and its reasons are many. Even while giving narratives of nation building in the mode of euphoria of a new nation or romantic idealization of the birth of the nation, Hindi cinema filmmakers avoided sharing the stories of trauma of partition. No doubt, de-romanticizing the idea of nation and nationalism, filmmakers like Chetan Anand, Bimal Roy, Raj Kapoor, Guru Dutt, they gave narratives of challenges that young India was facing. Despite all this, Hindi cinema did not share the stories of partition, the pain of migration, nor did it give major allegories of exile and homelessness. The silence of mainstream Hindi cinema over partition was not the result of incapability of the filmmaker of those times. It could have been a kind of willful silence maintained over the traumatic past, which is one of the strategies of negotiating with trauma. But for Chinnamol in Bangla, which was made very soon after partition, there is no major film that directly deals with partition. In Hindi cinema, the earliest response to partition is found in Chaliya, made by Manmohan Desai in 1960. Then Amar Rahe Ye Pyar, Prabhu Dayal, 1961. Dharamputra, Yash Chopra, 1961. So Amar Rahe Ye Pyar, Dharamputra used family melodrama as a trope to question the two-nation theory. Chaliya tells the problem of women who became victims of sexual violence during the partition. But for these three films, which are very high on melodrama, we do not have any other major film dealing with partition. The first film that raises a debate in the public domain vis-a-vis partition was concerned, it was M.S. Satyu's Garm Hawa, based on an unpublished story written by Ismat Chugtai. Its screenplay was written by Shama Zaidi and Kafi Azmi. Garm Hawa enjoys the status of the most nuanced film on partition made so far. The film does not give us a single visual of violence, but for one shot, no other shot of violence, and riots associated with the partition. The film deals more with the aftermath of partition than the incidents of partition. It presented the human cost paid by the society through the story of Salim Mirza, played by Balraj Sahni. He is the owner of a shoemaking factory, an idea given to the original story by Kafi Azmi, which he borrowed from his personal experiences. And Salim Mirza refuses to go to Pakistan after India's partition. His extended family has decided to leave India, and many other Muslim families in the city have decided to leave for Pakistan. In the wake of migration of Muslims to Pakistan, Salim Mirza chooses to stay back in India, his homeland. He has to face many hardships because of changing social, economic, and political environment of the country. His business is badly affected. He is time and again reminded that he should have also left for Pakistan like other Muslims. His refusal to leave his ancestral Haveli, his mother's breathing her last in the ancestral house, then Salim Mirza's search for a new house on rent is symbolic of his tragedy and the tragedy of the Muslims to find a new home in their homeland. The family, as shown in the film, was rendered homeless in their own city. The film debunks the popular notion that all Muslims were interested in the formation of Pakistan and moved to Pakistan conveniently, accepting it as a land for the Muslims. Now, there is one book, Muslims Against Partition of India, which also contributes to the same idea that there were many Muslim nationalists and Muslim poets, nationalist poets, who wrote against Muslim League, who wrote against the idea of Pakistan. So, but in popular imagination, in very simplistic manner, sometimes all Muslims are blamed that they wanted Pakistan, so they should have gone to Pakistan. And we should keep in mind that it might have been demand of a select few people, not all Muslims. There were many who decided to stay back in India because it was their homeland. Garm Hawa, through the struggle of Salim Mirza to find a new home, sprawling shots of architectural beauty of Sikri and Taj Mahal, reminds the viewers of the shared history and culture of Hindustan. The tangible sites of memory and common heritage becomes the fulcrum of the common collective memory of characters in the film and viewers in the society alike. Garm Hawa gives a different perspective on partition by showing the struggle of those Muslims who decided to stay back in India. The last scene of the film, when Salim Mirza has decided to leave India finally, he's sitting in a tonga and his son decides to jump into the protest going on. And that protest was demanding for jobs, issues of unemployment, issues that were bothering young India, which signifies that young man's claiming the land as his home and to assert his rightful status as Indians. And while accepting India as home, he is also willing to embrace the problems and challenges of the young India. Now, this film was made after 1971 Indo-Pakistan War. And in that larger context, even M.S. Satyu says that it was not easy for him to make a film on partition. Because the moment you make any, this is what M.S. Satyu says in one of his interviews, the moment you make any anti-Pakistan film, it turns out to become anti-Muslim films in India. But this is one film which confronts the question, those debates which were left unresolved during the partition and as well as during the time period when the film was made. The second film which I'm discussing is Mammo. This film was made by Shyam Benegal in the changing times of socio-political sphere of India. The decade of 1980s laid down the foundation of the new political narrative of India. Privatization of economy, beginning of consumerist culture, TV sets becoming a part of every household, and TV serials like the Ramayana, Mahabharata, Tamas, Bunyad, political controversies like Shah Banu case and Babri Masjid during the period of Rajiv Gandhi, and accompanied by unstable coalition governments in the last years of the 1980s, it prepared the ground for a new political party to emerge as an alternative and to take the stage. The people of India gradually started moving towards a new political discourse emerging in the country. However, the immediate cause behind Mammo was the infamous Bombay blast. Shyam Benegal responds to the new political situation and emerging crisis by making his famous Muslim trilogy. Mammo is the first film in that series. Now, this film tells the story of a Muslim woman who was born at Panipat. After her marriage and independence, when her family goes to Pakistan, she becomes a Pakistani woman. She becomes a Pakistani national. After her husband's death, she is virtually thrown out of her house. A homeless woman with a new national identity who wants to stay with her sister in Mumbai and which she thinks is her home, her challenges and struggle begin. India is her homeland. Now, because of bureaucratic reasons and new national identity that she is carrying, she becomes an outsider. She is seen as an outsider by her sister's grandson, who looks at her as an outsider intruder into his personal space. But when she strikes a friendly note with this young boy, together they go to watch a film, and the film happens to be Garam Hawa. So there is a direct reference to Garam Hawa in Mammo. So this relationship of intertextuality between Mammo and Garam Hawa gives a direction to the discourse in Mammo as well. This woman is reminded of her personal trauma, her being uprooted from her homeland. And she tells the young Riyaz stories of partition, migration, tragic tales of suffering, rapes, and deaths. In her stories surface the pain of losing one's home, the loss of synthetic culture from a woman's perspective, and remnants of trauma of partition in her life. Her situation in the film reminds the audience the way people were rendered homeless during the partition. Even though she was born at Panipat, but she is now an outsider in her own homeland. She prefers to overstay in India after the expiry of her visa, but she is forcibly sent back to Pakistan. Her relationship with her homeland is made complicated by bureaucracy of newly formed two nation states. Now, subverting the system, she manages to produce her own death certificate and finds a way to live with her sister in India. Ironically, she has to die on papers so that she could live in her homeland. And in the wake of the changing political configuration of the country, I think Shyam Benegal is raising this question: is India home to all Muslims or not? And for that, the question of home in the film becomes the central metaphor. Third film which I want to talk about is Mulk, made in 2018 by Anubhav Sinha. Now, this film takes the debate of the status of Muslims in India to the next level. Aesthetically, the film is different from the films made by M.S. Satyu and Shyam Benegal. But this film shows the younger generation of a Muslim family slipping into terrorism, and consequent upon which the entire family is branded as terrorist. The film touches upon many sensitive issues at a time. Based on a real story, the film captures tensions, biases, prejudices prevalent in the Indian society in the present. The film shows a young Indian Muslim man slipping into the mire of Islamic fundamentalism and the ambivalent relationship between people belonging to different communities in the same area, in the same city. In Banaras, this time it is Banaras. The fabric of friendly ties between Hindus and Muslims is easily threatened by or shaken by one incident, surfacing the chasm existing in the Indian society. Increasing Islamic fundamentalism in the world has resulted into Islamophobia in India as well. And there are reasons for that. I'm not saying that this is baseless. There are certain reasons, but sometimes it goes beyond the limit as well. The process of otherization and hatred against Muslims is rooted somewhere in the history of the partition of India. Now, there is another level at which the film can be seen. So while reflecting the underlying anxieties of Indian society, it also challenges notions that Indian cinema has constructed on screen. Hindi cinema has propagated stereotypical representation. In many films, if there is any conservative Muslim or fundamentalist Muslim, he is given very strong markers of Muslim identity. Fine. One stereotypical representation of an Islamic fundamentalist is of a man with those identity markers, kept growing a beard and then wearing the skull cap. Mulk, this film, while debating the status of Muslim in India, also confronts this tradition of representation. In its double-edged representation, we have a character who wears all markers of Muslim identity, yet he loves his country. Murad Ali Muhammad is a lawyer. He prays at a mosque daily. So he is a Namazi, but he is not communal. He frequently socializes with his Hindu friends. It is his routine to have a morning cup of tea with people while coming back from the mosque after offering his morning namaz. So look at the different practices which have been put together in one frame, we can say. He invites his Hindu vegetarian friends to his house and who stealthily take a bite of kebab, hinting towards such contact zones between different communities and cultures where identities cease to be rigid. Even if one is donning a beard, wears a skull cap, or wears a marks of Hindu identity, the atmosphere is jovial and harmonious. People, as shown in the film, carry their respective religious identities without being communal. Murad Ali's Muhammad's son joins a group of terrorists, and consequently, the entire family is branded as terrorists. On the outer wall of their house, people write, "Go to Pakistan." Murad Ali here fights a legal battle, not only to prove his innocence, but also to prove his love for his country, that is India. In this battle, he is helped by a Hindu lawyer, his daughter. While he is fighting his battle to prove his innocence, he refuses to accept the dead body of his son, who had joined hands with terrorists. Murad Ali's trial represents the trial of all those Muslims who have to prove their loyalty to their country, and also of the nation, of the system, which tries otherwise, which tries to put Muslims in a very simplistic manner, which doubts them on the basis of their religious identities. Murad Ali in this film asserts India to be his country, and he says this is his mulk and his home. So the question of home in all these three films is handled differently. It moves around the categories of home, homeland, and a sense of exile. Traditionally or conventionally, exile has been understood as a state of being away from the homeland. The state of exile is marked with a strong desire and hope of returning to the homeland. These films show the state of exile of characters while being at home. Salim Mirza and Momo are struggling to find a home for themselves, while Murad is fighting a battle to assert his claim. Salim Mirza's son claims his home by jumping into the protest. Momo claims his home by deceiving the bureaucracy, and Murad Ali claims his home through a metaphoric trial, legal trial. Now, their condition becomes complicated because of their religious identity and new national identities. Momo is one character who suffers at the end at the hands of her gender identities as well. So in their exile at home, the internal exile, we do not have and we do not find any anxiety to return to the homeland. They do not have such anxiety. Rather, they expect to find their home in their homelands, and they expect the people of other communities to embrace them. Salim Mirza has lost his ancestral Haveli. Momo, born in India, has become an outsider. Murad Ali fights a battle. These characters represent the pangs of internal exile at home, in which their relationship with their home and people around them becomes enigmatic and sometimes paradoxical. It is not on material objects or memorabilia that their imagination of the homeland or home rests on in nostalgia. Rather, their desire to claim their home is founded on their experiences of being otherized and its violent impact on their minds. All these filmmakers, M.S. Satyu, Shyam Benegal, and then the filmmaker of Mulk, Sinha, they are non-Muslim filmmakers. Though the screenplay of Garam Hawa and Mamo, written by Muslim writers, Shama Zaidi, Kafi Azmi, and then Khalid Muhammad. Their presence in the film, especially Shama Zaidi, Kafi Azmi in this crew of Garam Hawa, it adds an ideological complexion to the film. Both M.S. Satyu and Shyam Benegal, they're part of Indian New Wave, which attained an impetus in the 1970s. M.S. Satyu was an active member in theatre. He had worked as an assistant to Chetan Anand, but he looked at India from a different, from his own ideological position. These films, it means, cannot be called as enunciations of Muslim authors. Though Muslim screenplay writers are there in two of these films, but still these films cannot be called as the enunciations of Muslim authors. Garam Hawa was made when political cinema was at its peak. Mamo is made when we can say that Indian New Wave cinema was waning in the wake of the new economic policies India had embraced. Mulk is made when economic liberalization has been there in the country for more than 25 years. So there are different socio-economic and political contexts when these three films are made, but they are debating with the same issue. These movies are also made at three junctures of India's political history. There were differences between, no doubt, there were differences between communities, Hindus or Muslims, since we can say the medieval period. But the fault lines of cultural, linguistic, and religious differences were played upon by the British. The British policies resulted into widening the gulf during the latter part of the 19th and first half of the 20th century. People in India also became conscious of their religious and linguistic identity, which collided to formulate their national identities, and it worked against their regional identities. The religious identity gradually began to dominate over linguistic or regional identities, giving the people a new idea of nation. So in popular imagination, if Hindi and Hindustan was one category, then Urdu was wrongly associated with Muslims and then with Pakistan. Though we know that there is a debate that whether people in Pakistan, they want to accept Urdu as their language or not. People in Sindh, people of Baloch, people of Punjab in Pakistan, they prefer to speak their first language over Urdu. So that debate is disturbing, or it's bothering Pakistan as a modern nation state as well. India continues to face, to conclude, and now I'm about to conclude my presentation, India continues to face the challenges posed by the changing ideas of nation and sub-nation within one nation in India. The question of Indian identity is often debated. Pan-Indian identity and religious identities smash against each other. International politics around and against the Muslim community influences the way Muslims are perceived, and it also affects Muslims as a subject and as an object, Muslims in India. So the seeds of hatred that were sown during the British period, they showed their results first during the communal riots, which erupted during the partition. And there is the legacy of hatred and politics over these identities in the post-colonial India as well. So the three films which I have discussed in today's presentation, they tell the stories of a nation with its internal fractures, with its internal challenges, and which I see as a legacy of the partition that we all share. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. As you have discussed the theme of partition and the film and the context of film, the subject of film, that we have to read the film rather than watch the films. I would like to open the session for question and answer, and then there will be remarks from the chairperson, Dr. K. Rajkumar, sir.
Good morning to one and all. Hello, good morning to one and all. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. I think now the session is open for discussion. If anybody has any query, any question, or any observation, or anybody has to add something or may offer some suggestions, now the session is open for discussion. May I request all the participants to, you can say, participate in the discussion.
A very good morning, sir. Good morning to you all.
Good morning.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
So more than question, I'll really appreciate and thank you for a wonderful and detailed account on this situation. Most of the researchers are really probing into certain things, and you have really thrown light on the things which are really useful for the researchers, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wonderful.
Thanks for your kind words.
Yes, any other scholar? Hello? Dr. Gutte, Dr. Kiran.
Dr. Maknikar, do you want to ask a question as you have raised your hand? Okay, I think there are no questions, sir. You can proceed. Over to you, sir, for your
Okay.
remarks.
Okay. I must congratulate Dr. Vivek Sachdeva for this wonderful presentation. And I would like to thank the organizers, Shivaji Mahavidyalaya, the governing body, the principal, the vice principal, the convener, Dr. Kiran Gutte, and his head of the department, Dr. Naule, for providing me with this great opportunity to preside over such a wonderful session. Okay. I've been trying to grapple with the technical issues for the last half an hour, because all we know that uninterrupted internet connectivity is still a distant reality in the rural areas of India. And I'm working in a rural area. I have tried my level best to catch hold of each and every point or issue raised by Dr. Vivek Sachdeva, but he has done a great, you can say, justice to the topic given to him. Okay, he has touched upon so many important issues. He began with how the vocabulary of partition, even after 74 years, if we count the number of years from 1947, even if we count after 1971, still 40 plus years. So why these issues of partition still tickle our minds now and then? And Dr. Vivek Sachdeva has talked about how you can say the vocabulary of partition has become an important part of the discourse nowadays. And he also talked about binary divisions. He also talked about the identity formation. And I must say, the issues that raised are the aspects touched upon by Dr. Vivek Sachdeva are quite thought-provoking. And his way of presentation is very effective. And okay, as I just mentioned, there are some certain technical issues. So as there is no uninterrupted, you can say, connecting in our area. So, but still, whatever I could gather, whatever I could, you can say, catch hold of from his very interesting lecture, I would like once again congratulate Dr. Vivek Sachdeva, and I look forward to have many more such informative and effective talks in the days to come. And before I make it a point, once again, I would like to thank Dr. Kiran Gutte, because actually I was busy in some other administrative work, but it is because of his persuasion, shall I say, and it is because of my dear friend, Dr. M.M. Nivargi, that I could say yes to Dr. Kiran Gutte. And I would like to thank once again all the participants and the resource person and the organizers once again for providing me with this golden opportunity to listen to. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, sir. As Sachdeva sir said, that the film representation, the screenplay and the shots, as Garam Hawa, the film, that there are some shots. This film is based upon partition, but the shots are without violence. There are no shots of violence. And it is the skill of the director and filmmaker what to show and what has to be represented on the screen. It is different, screenplay is different, and how the thought has to be picturized on the screen is different. Every director is not successful in this representation of his thoughts and symbolical events on the screen. But as Sachdeva sir has talked about the nation as a home after the partition of India and Pakistan, how Muslims are thinking about their nation. What kind of effects of the partition are there on the people of India and Pakistan and Bangladesh and other countries? He has very skillfully and very tactfully, he has with the evidences of the films, as he has mentioned Chaliya, Amar Rahe, Pyar Hamara or Dharamputra, he has given some examples of the films, and his observation is that Hindi film industry is not able to talk freely on the issues of partition. So these are my observations, and now I would like to invite Dr. Vishnu Pawar sir to propose vote of thanks.
Thank you, Gutte sir. First, I would like to thank chairperson of this session, Dr. K. Rajkumar sir, Principal Guru Buddha Swami Mahavidyalaya Purna, for chairing this session. I would like to thank resource person of this session, Dr. Vivek Sachdeva, Professor, Department of English, Guru Gobind Singh, Indraprasth University, New Delhi, for his wonderful talk. I thank Vivek Sachdeva sir for enlightening us. Thank you, sir. And I would like to thank all participants for attending this session. Over to Gutte sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Sachdeva sir, and thank you, Rajkumar sir, for giving the time for this session. Now, after this session, we will start the next technical session at 1:30. Exactly at 1:30. The resource person of this session is Dr. Madhavi Nikam, Professor, Department of English, R.K. Talreja College, Ulhasnagar, Thane. And after that, the next technical session will be at 2:30. The resource person of this session will be Dr. Chidanand Bhattacharya. So we will have the break and then again we will join to the session, technical session, which will start at 1:30 p.m. The link for the session is the same. All of you are invited to join this session. Thank you. We will meet again at 1:30. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiran.
Okay,
Thank you, Vishnu Pawar.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you, Dr. Kiran. Have a good day.